So hi everyone. My name's my name's Dr. Daniel Jones. I'm a public health registrar, and I'm the deputy chair for terms and conditions in the Welsh Resident Doctors Committee. So we're just doing a very informal and quick webinar for yourselves as clinical academics, just because of your unique contractual situation. And hopefully we can just get through this presentation quite quickly, and then we can get to any questions and the like you have. So just as a reminder in terms of the context, so this all started back in 2022. There'd been a previous attempt to negotiate and reform the contract that ran for a few years, but in the end, membership rejected the proposed contract, and the incoming committee then prioritised and focused on full pay restoration. That culminated in a pay campaign, several rounds of industrial action, and then a pay offer that was accepted by the majority of membership. Part of that pay offer was a commitment to re-enter contract negotiations. And then learning lessons from last time, there was then a lot of extensive engagement with membership, somewhat reflecting on the reasons that the last contract failed, but also asking people what they wanted out of a contract, what would work, what doesn't work at the moment. And that consisted of workplace events, online events, and we also went through a lot of extant BMA policy on this matter, as well as looking at contracts in other nations. Your elected committee then put together a negotiating mandate, and we appointed and trained a team of negotiators. That then culminated into a deal that the committee felt was appropriate to put to members, and then that deal was also then approved by the Cabinet Secretary. And so that is why we're able to put it to you. And we're just going to go through what's on the offer. So just in the context of our pay restoration journey, one of the headlines for this is that there is 4% additional investment on top of the pay award this year. And so when we calculate pay erosion and pay restoration matters, we do genuinely take account of additional investment and contractual reform like this. So this is 4% into the resident doctor workforce, mainly into pay. And you can see that with the pay award as it stood, we were going from 20.8 to 19.1% left in terms of pay erosion. This additional 4% takes us to 16.1%. So a level of pay not seen since before 2015. And what we would consider to be good progress on our way towards pay restoration. This is with the caveat that this is not like the pay award we already had. Different people will get different amounts. There won't be a back pay element to it, but this does constitute movement in terms of pay restoration as we would see it. And then the pay system has 4 elements to it. We'll go through each of these ones in turn, but essentially they add up into each other. So there is the basic pay element, and you can see the proposed pay scales there, as well as the old ones. And essentially the pay scale has been consolidated into fewer points, so an F1 and F2 point, and then you have a registrar post-foundation scale. And like the current 2002 contract, this part of the scale is still years in service based, and those are calendar years. So it's just instead of progressing with every year, you progress with every 2 years in order to go up a pay point. And you can see the relevant pay points. And generally, you can see that the basic pay levels in this contract are higher than you would get in 2002. They're also front-loaded. And again, this is very beneficial for your career average earnings. Basic pay is pensionable. Other parts of pay are not. So given that we are on a career average earnings pension schemes, if you remain in the NHS pension scheme, that is, this is very favourable from a pensionability point of view. And I guess for yourselves as clinical academics, the key thing here is that it has remained years in service pay progression, and there continues to be an ability to claim incremental credit, and such incremental credit would include things like every year's substantive posts abroad, the any years you take out to do a PhD, any years you take out to do a particular fellowship or the like, so like an UP, for example, any statutory leave like parental leave, as well as a research degree. So like with a master's degree or something like that, so long as you can argue the case that it's relevant, that would be counted as incremental credit. And therefore that's all being captured in your pay progression. And this is the key reason why there isn't a clinical academic premium in this proposed contract like you would get in the 2016 contract in England. The main reason that premium was introduced was a way of compensating for the stalled pay progression you would get when you went out a program to your PhD. Because you continue to progress during your PhD on this pay scale, that clinical academic premium is necessary. So I hope that makes sense. And then there's an additional hours element. This is based on every hour. This is only if you're full-time, and it's based on every hour a week you do above the 40, and it is paid on that basis. I should say that if you are LTFT, then it's mainly your basic pay that you get paid for, and your basic pay is calculated as your average total hours as a percentage of the nominal 40-hour working week. So if you're 80% on a 48-hour equivalent full-time rota, and that ends up with 38 hours, then essentially your basic pay is 38 over 40 times whatever basic pay point it is. So I hope that makes sense, and why if you're LTFT, because you work less than 40 hours a week on average, by definition, you won't get this additional hours element. But we've had a bit of confusion about that. Then there is an out of hours element that you get on top of your basic pay and any additional hours pay. We have retained the plain time definition in the 2002 contract, which is 7 to 7, Monday to Friday, but also been able to clarify that that excludes bank holidays, whereas previously they were included. And essentially, any hours that you work outside of this get paid at 1.5 times the rate. And so how that will be paid out is essentially a top up to your pay as an additional payment on top of any basic pay you have, as well as any additional hours pay that you have. And we've got pay tables up on the web page to give you an illustration of what that looks like. In counting this, it is also just to say that where it is a night shift or a disco shift, even if the hours of that shift are taking you into plain time, so say you finish night shift at 8 a.m. or something, all of the hours of the shift count as unsocial. So you don't get a mean kind of nitpicking at that point. And then if you do any non-residential on call, and so this is where you are off site, but you are available to give telephone advice or to return to site, then you will get paid according to how many hours you are available on your on-call duty periods, and that is about 50% of the basic hourly rate. And then if you perform any work, you will claim that retrospectively. So you've got the availability as a consistent monthly baseline based on the average across the rota. And then any work you actually do on call, you claim it retrospectively. That will be like that will be pretty analogous to an expense. This is what other NHS staff groups do already. Some of them are even able to do it by app. And there won't be supervisor involvement. There won't need to be an element of electronic proof or anything like that required. You will essentially put in what you worked, claim it, and that will get paid out in the next payroll cycle. And then if it's outside plain time, you get topped up for that relevant work. And then another stipulation is that if more than 75% of the shift is worked, then you'll get paid for the whole shift. I won't go into these too much, just in the interest of time, but it is just to point out that there are some pay supplements. A GP one to replace what was GP banding, and then again that is effectively a front-loaded GP premium, but we've done a GP registrar webinar already. And then there is this max fax premium, which is to do with the fact that they've got to do foundation twice and some of the changes we made to the pay scale. There will be an ability for employers, Welsh Government, HIW, to introduce bespoke recruitment and retention premium in future, potentially, but they would do that with any additional funding. So the key thing is we haven't had to use any funding we had available for contract reform in order to deliver any specific pay premium. And the last element on pay is just around overtime reporting. It's very similar to the on-call duty claims. The idea of this is that if you work beyond what your rostered shift is, then you will be able to claim that as additional payment. Again, there won't be supervisor involvement or any electronic proof required. You will be trusted to accurately report any overtime that you do, and then that will get claimed in, and it will get paid out in the next cycle. And even for people who remain on 2002 contract, we will be amending that contract in order to introduce this system. So this will completely replace rota monitoring, whether you go onto the new contract or not. And the aim, as per our framework agreement, is to aim to include clinical academics in that, and we'll have work streams coming off the back of any contract if it's accepted, and we'll use those work streams in the run up to any contract introduction to work on issues like that. There's very much aiming to get you included into the system. I thought I would just do a worked pay example, and this is as a journey, not to be comprehensive in this, but more just to illustrate some proofs of concept here. So first thing is that this is academic surgeon. So again, I appreciate it won't be relevant to all clinical academics here. If you do have any particular circumstances or anything more individual, then please reach out to us via the WhatsApp. And I'm very happy to go through anything with you if you have particular questions. But this is just to give a sense of what it looks like if for a surgeon working quite an intense rota. One of the key things when you're doing any pay comparisons or calculations is with the new contract, you do need to deduct leave prospectively. We've got a whole crib sheet now on our webpage in terms of how to do that. When you do this on this person's working 47 average total hours a week with 16.5 unsocial per week on average. So it is a very intense rota. It is 50% banded, and this is a real rota. And you can see that generally the proposed contract pays out more on this than the current contract, even with that 50% banding. You can see that because the pay, there's 2 years between every pay points. The first couple of years, the pay stays the same, and then they would increment if they were continuing to do it. In this scenario, they go off to do their PhD. Now, I've not included the clinical stipend because I appreciate it does vary depending on what you specifically have chosen to do. But if you do revert back to basic pay during clinical academic years, then obviously, as you can see from the pay scales, you will be on more money during any prospective PhD on the proposed contract and scales than you would be on the old one, as a result of the higher basic pay across the board. But appreciate there's some variability in terms of how people handle the clinical stipend. And then the last thing just to show is that during that PhD, under both contracts, you continue to increment, and as you can see, therefore, there's quite a big jump in pay before the PhD and after the PhD, that jump is because of the increment of the continued pay progression, and that is why a clinical academic pay premium or the like is not necessary, because that progression is continued, and you can still see that the proposed contract is still paying out more even at the higher pay point, and that generally, at least in this scenario, the proposed contract is more favourable even when you don't account for clinical stipend. And generally we found that with the vast majority of rotas that we've modelled, and certainly all the pay journeys we've done, that the proposed contract is either comparable or it's favourable in terms of pay, and that's notwithstanding the pension benefits as well. Um, I'm skipping. Sorry. Yeah, there we go. So then the next bit is just safety and training. The one of the things that this contract would introduce is job planning. Currently, you're only really entitled to a roster. I appreciate some people do get work schedules, but this would ensure that you get a job plan, a generic one for the post. You get your duty roster, and then you get a personalized job plan. And again, there's a specific clinical academic component here. So as per the framework agreement, we're finally trying to contractualize what has been a principle for a time, but this idea of having a job plan that is mutually and jointly agreed between your university employer, your NHS employer, and yourself. And that follows FOLIT principles in terms of accounting for both your clinical work and your academic work. And one of the things changing with the proposed contract is certainly in terms of the duty roster, there will now be a timeline where currently there isn't. And if things are not delivered as per that timeline, then there are fines for the employer in order to incentivize to get them on time. If you are doing active hours work, then the new contract introduces a range of working protections. This isn't an exhaustive list. I put some of them up there, and there are other aspects to the contract as well. But that's all on our webpage if you want to get more information on that. And appreciate you may have seen other presentations where we talk about that a bit more. Just skipping the next couple. So yeah, I just want to say in terms of leave, so generally the leave arrangements become more favourable on the proposed contract. So there are things that currently aren't available, like shared parental leave, compassionate leave, not being able to have fixed leave. All of that becomes available on the proposed contract. So fixed leave not being allowed, and getting access to things like shared parental leave and compassionate leave, and being able to request leave in advance, including a rule around requests made more than 6 weeks or more in advance being positively received. And as per now, there are additional 5 days of annual leave after 5 years of service from first employment. And again, I mainly put this in there just to clarify that would include any time you step out for, at least in terms of these purposes. I appreciate a lot of university contracts and employers will have their own arrangements for annual leave. But if they're mirroring or looking to use any NHS terms, then it's just to say that under the proposed contract, that is being retained and those years will count. There will be an exception reporting system introduced, but it will mainly just be to do with safety and training. So that overtime perspective is being taken out of it. The job plan will contain things like education and development time, safe staffing, etc. So if these things are not met, it is something that can potentially be exception reported. That is between yourself, your educational supervisor, and a guardian of safe working. So again, there's not necessarily going to be local department involvement unless it's like appropriate and it's with your consent. And these exception reports will be able to compensate you with additional education and development time potentially. It might result in fines being issued, with the fine money then being spent on resident doctor well-being and education and training. And as per the overtime, the intention is to get clinical academics access to this system, even if they're university employed. That is in the framework agreement. And again, it's something that we'll work on a work stream around. And here's some specific examples of the kinds of things that might be exception reported. And as you can see, this is mainly around safety and training, but it's not an exhaustive list, and we've got more details on the web page. And as I mentioned just then, there will be guardians of safe and flexible working introduced, and where you are in a NHS host employer, you would be covered by the Guardian of Safe and Flexible Working in that employer. They are there to monitor the overtime and the exception reporting systems, and they can raise fines and potentially review job plans. If you're not happy with the job plan, if you're not meeting educational objectives, you have the ability to appeal it. And they're also there to promote and improve support to flexible working arrangements, which again might be relevant to yourselves. And then the transitional arrangements. So I'm just going to give a broad overview, because I think whatever happens, if the package is accepted, it is going to have to be quite nuanced and individual when it comes to yourselves as clinical academics, and will involve conversations with university employers, etc. But broadly, if the package is accepted from August 2026, any new starters will start on it. And then certain unbanded specialties will also transfer, because broadly they benefit from the contract. Everyone else will remain on the 2002 contract for the time being, and they'll continue to increment on that, and they'll continue to get annual pay uplifts applied to it. And then from August 2027, we will begin the process of transferring everyone. And that will be on a voluntary basis, so you transfer when you want to, and the intention is then by August 2028 that everyone that most people have transferred, unless they've got about 12 months left to CCT or they meet certain exception criteria, and there's a bit more detail on that in the framework agreement. At the point you transfer onto the new contract, you will get cash flow pay protection. So your pay cannot go down. That cash flow protection is based on your total pay, including your banding, and that will stay with you until such a point as you would earn more on the new contract. And as per the slide there, and as I said earlier, the majority of rotors do see pay uplift on the system. The banding system produces quite a lot of variability, because it's based around criteria that are either met or not. And so there are some people who do very well out of that system. And that is why we have got this extended transition, as well as the cash flow pay protection kicked in. For anyone who's newly starting the system as a new starter, because of the front loading of the pay scale, even with the rota variation and we'd expect their career average earnings and the net financial impact to be positive on them for across their whole career. So it's mainly about protecting people who are already advanced in their career, high at the pay scale, and are on one of these very specific rotas. There are some other elements of the package as well. So one is study leave reforms, and this would include the study budget that you still get with HOW. So that WCAT study leave policy, for example, would get updated as well. So it's clarifying these are short-term things that we could get to improve the immediate situation. So it's clarifying things like sitting days, boosting the cap, ensuring that there's no rollover cap. So it currently caps out at 1,200, and that's it. Whereas this would carry on accumulating throughout your training, getting the caps have inflation applied to them, and then getting reimbursed at the point that you pay out the expense, rather than having to wait until you've done the course. We do recognise that those are not. That is not the problem fixed. We did a whole review with Welsh Government and employers as part of our pay offer. And so there are a series of medium to long-term ambitions that we've mutually agreed as well, that are not part of the package, but will work towards off the back of it. And the eventual vision is having centralised funding that has any courses or events that you need to do prepaid and pre-booked for you, and then having discretionary funding yourself for anything on top of that. Training bottlenecks is also an element of it as well. So we're very cognizant of the unemployment situation, both the post F2 bottleneck as well as the post CCT bottlenecks. And again, some of the language that we've got in the framework agreement and the intention is to look at the clinical academic situation as well. So to look at your funding, to look at academic training posts, as well as like thinking about posts latterly after that too. There is already been training post expansion recommended by HOW for next year, and we've lobbied on that. We're awaiting Welsh Government response. But it is just say if the package is accepted, then a substantive training bottlenecks piece of work will start off the back of it. And then we wanted to talk specifically about contracts as another academic benefit. So we obviously will always remain committed as to the other parties, as ensuring that you've got pay parity with your clinical colleagues who are not academics. And one of the other work streams that will come off the back of the package, if it's accepted, will be looking at clinical academics. So I've already mentioned some of the things around exception reporting and overtime reporting, just making sure that that all works, but also looking at the current university contracts you get and their alignment with the resident doctor contract, where and seeing what we can do around that. But also trying to look again potentially at the honorary NHS contracts you get as well, and ensuring that there is a national model standard ideally, and that it's modernised. So that's all stuff that we would look to explore and would hopefully be a benefit to yourselves. We do, we will be frank in terms of concessions. So the most obvious one is would have liked more additional investment. 4% was the limit of what we could get, and that was with a material threat of industrial action in the room. So I think, we think that to realistically get more than that would require actual industrial action at this point, and that's a judgment we have to make. We've agreed to drop the rate cards and enter negotiations around all Wales rates, which has been quite a standard feature of pay offers. If the talks around that rate card don't go anywhere, or we end up back in dispute, then the rate card is always something we can reintroduce. I talked through the pay scales earlier. At one point between the second and third pay point, there will be a specification that, as well as 4 years of incremental credit or equivalent, you will need to have spent at least 2 years in a formal training program in order to access the higher training point, that higher pay point, or to have been in the equivalent of a training program. And so it's set out in the framework agreement in terms of the criteria, but again, substantive posts would typically count towards that. So it's only really ad hoc locum work that might mean you don't meet that pay point immediately. And that would be counted as a half rate for incremental credit, as it is now. But we're not expecting this to affect many people, and the ones that are will effectively be held up at that pay point for a while they are progressing through the training. As soon as they get the 2 years equivalent, they then catch up. So the effect is not too substantive. So I mentioned the extended transition, and that's mainly around like flexibility and support for resident doctors, and making the decisions they've made around career planning and financial planning. As anyone who's new on the contract will generally benefit. Ideally, we would have wanted it to be longer for people currently on 2002 to be able to stay on it for longer. The opening position of employers was not to run 2 contracts at the same time at all, and so 2028 is a compromise position essentially. And then there is this last point about basic pay protection for career grades like SAS doctors on returning. And again, part of our rationale for the retaining the pay progression system was that this would act as a form of pay protection, and so the contract would be simpler, and so they don't get the basic pay protection that they would have had. There's not really many people in this position anyway, but those that are, all of their years after post-foundation count towards incremental credit. So they typically start very high up the pay scale anyway. So we're not expecting a great impact there. We've been asked quite a lot about this proposed contract versus the current one, as well as the 2016 one in England. So there's a much more extensive version of this on our webpage, but this is broad headlines, so I won't go through it. This isn't exhaustive, but I hope it makes it clear that this is quite a bespoke contract, and it's got some similarities with both the 2016 and the 2002 ones, as well as like some very different stuff. And then, yeah, in terms of next steps, the referendum will run from 24th to the 15th, and that's all resident doctors working in Wales, as well as final year medical students studying here. Just to be clear, that as clinical academics, you do get a vote in this, and yeah, we'll make sure that as we're going through it, if you don't get a voting email or anything like, then you'll be able to get in touch in order to get one. But if you are a member, then you will get a vote in it. And we've got further information available on the webpage, as I said. There's a link there. And if you can't find your answer there, then you can always contact us on the WhatsApp community, or you can email us at that email address there. And yeah, you do need to be a member in order to have a vote. So, and you have to join by the 9th of December in order to have your say. So, diolch yn fawr, and we will get to any questions we have now. And I'm going to stop presenting. And yeah, I'm cognizant that some people may have posted questions in the WCAT WhatsApp group or the like as well. So you know, I'm happy to answer anything from there. Thanks. Well, any questions at all? Okay. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Imogen. So one of the FAQs does go through the benefits for clinical academics. That's around retaining years in service-based pay progression and being able to retain the academic premium. Sorry, the incremental credits. There is no need for an academic premium as a result of that. Getting the job planning and ensuring that job planning is around the FOLIP principles, making sure that you have access to things like overtime reporting and exception reporting as and when they come in. And then some of the stuff I mentioned around bottlenecks, as well as the contractual work. I can see you posted it in the chat as well, so that's great. And yeah, if I think when it comes to transition and various arrangements, then that will probably be quite bespoke and specific to the circumstances. But we've got those work streams ready to come off the back of the contract package if it's accepted, and we'll very much be working with yourselves, with university employers and NHS employers to ensure that it's all as smooth as possible. And yeah, as I said, Jonathan, if anyone does have any questions, then please do just get in touch and let us know. Otherwise, I'll leave it there.